You need to hear this if you're a follower of global politics. Vladimir Putin's Russia projects an image of formidable strength. We see displays of military might, assertive foreign policy, and a leader seemingly impervious to Western pressure. But this image of strength masks a deeper vulnerability. Putin's Russia is brittle, resistant to change, and dangerously reliant on external actors. Putin came of age in the Soviet system, a world of centralized planning and rigid hierarchies. This experience seems to have ingrained in him a static worldview, one where adaptation and improvisation are weaknesses. This rigidity is evident in his response to events in Ukraine. Faced with unexpected Ukrainian resistance and Western resolve, Putin has doubled down on his initial strategy. He seems unable or unwilling to adjust his goals or tactics, clinging to a playbook that is no longer effective. This inflexibility is not a sign of strength, but rather a dangerous vulnerability in a world defined by rapid change and unexpected challenges. Beyond Putin's personal leadership style, Russia's vulnerabilities are deeply embedded in its economic and technological foundations. Despite its vast natural resources, Russia remains heavily reliant on foreign partners. Its economy is overly dependent on exports of raw materials, particularly oil and gas, leaving it susceptible to price fluctuations and sanctions. Moreover, Russia lags behind the West in key technological sectors. It relies on foreign companies for everything from semiconductors to advanced manufacturing equipment. This dependence creates a critical vulnerability, as the Western sanctions have demonstrated. The West's ability to cripple Russia's access to vital technologies has exposed the fragility of its economy and its dependence on global supply chains. This reliance on foreign partners stands in stark contrast to the image of self-sufficiency that the Kremlin projects. It reveals a fundamental weakness, one that the West can exploit to exert pressure on the Russian regime. While the West has shown remarkable unity in responding to Russia's aggression in Ukraine, its approach has been characterized by incrementalism rather than decisiveness. Western sanctions, while significant, have been implemented gradually, giving Russia time to adapt and find workarounds. Furthermore, the West has been hesitant to provide Ukraine with the full range of military support it needs to decisively defeat Russia. This cautious approach, while understandable given the risks of escalation, has allowed the conflict to drag on, resulting in immense suffering and instability. The West's incremental response stems from a desire to avoid direct confrontation with Russia. However, this approach has inadvertently emboldened Putin, creating the impression that the West lacks the stomach for a protracted conflict. By failing to impose significant costs early on, the West missed a crucial opportunity to deter further aggression and alter Putin's calculus. The West needs to abandon its incremental approach and adopt a more assertive strategy, one that shifts from containment to constriction. This requires significantly escalating economic pressure on Russia, crippling its ability to wage war and sustain its economy. The West must target Russia's energy sector, the lifeblood of its economy, by rapidly phasing out Russian oil and gas imports. Simultaneously, the West should provide Ukraine with the advanced weaponry it needs to repel the invasion and inflict a decisive defeat on Russian forces. Beyond immediate military aid, the West must accelerate Ukraine's integration into Western institutions, granting it a clear path to NATO and EU membership. This would send a powerful message to Putin that his attempts to reassert Russian hegemony have backfired, strengthening the West's resolve and deterring future aggression. A more assertive Western strategy carries risks, but the potential rewards outweigh the dangers. Sustained pressure on the Kremlin could fracture Putin's regime, exposing its internal contradictions and weakening its grip on power. Moreover, a decisive Western victory in Ukraine would reshape the geopolitical landscape, demonstrating the futility of aggression and strengthening the rules-based international order. It would signal to other autocrats that the West will not tolerate violations of international law and is willing to bear the costs of defending its values. The conflict in Ukraine is a defining moment for the West. It is a test of its unity, its resolve, and its commitment to defending the principles of democracy and self-determination. By embracing a bolder, more decisive strategy, the West can not only defeat Putin's aggression, but also lay the foundation for a more stable and secure international order. Ukraine's resistance, seen as a symbol of resilience, could indeed inspire other regions, such as Chechnya and other republics in the Caucasus, which have long histories of seeking autonomy or independence. The war in Ukraine has not only intensified discussions around sovereignty and freedom, but also placed Russia's geopolitical maneuvers under increased scrutiny. Should Ukraine succeed in pushing back the invasion, it could indeed reignite the aspirations of regions with separatist movements within Russia, such as Chechnya, amplifying calls for greater autonomy or independence. Putin's strategic mistake in Ukraine presents a golden opportunity for the West to reshape the global order. After the potential collapse of Russia, the West could indeed find itself in a stronger position to counter China, both strategically and economically. The collapse of Russia could lead to a realignment in Eurasia, reducing Chinese influence in Central Asia, where Russia and China have often competed for dominance. With Russia weakened or fragmented, the West could expand its influence in these regions, creating new alliances and reducing China's strategic depth. Russia is a major supplier of energy and raw materials. If the West manages to secure or support stable access to these resources post-collapse, it could reduce China's ability to dominate global resource markets. This would also lessen China's leverage over energy-hungry nations and weaken its Belt and Road Initiative, which relies heavily on resource-rich regions. A weakened or collapsed Russia would disrupt China's northern and western borders, forcing China to focus more on internal stability and its own borders. With fewer global allies and less Russian support, China would be more isolated, making it easier for the West to contain its geopolitical and economic ambitions. A Russian collapse could embolden Western alliances like NATO and bolster partnerships with countries in the Indo-Pacific such as Japan, India, and Australia to form a more cohesive front against Chinese expansionism. It would also send a message to other authoritarian regimes that aggression and expansionist policies are unsustainable. Without Russia as a strategic partner, China would face greater global isolation. The West could exploit this vacuum by forming stronger coalitions with emerging powers and developing nations that may view China's growing influence with skepticism. The diplomatic and economic pressure on China could thus intensify. In this scenario, while China would still be a formidable power, a post-Russian collapse world could provide the West with a more advantageous position to shape global policies, counter Chinese influence, and maintain a liberal international order. It's a poignant reminder of how interconnected global struggles for freedom can become, as the impact of Ukraine's defense might ripple far beyond its borders, reshaping the geopolitical landscape in Eastern Europe and beyond. In seizing this moment, the West could indeed redefine the balance of power, reinforcing a rules-based international order that prioritizes sovereignty, freedom, and democratic governance.